Yo, short box
Man,
nation.
what a subdued yo after the last thing we just talked about. He
Yeah.
was like,
Which no one will ever hear.
no,
Unless you subscribe to our Patreon.
that was good.
Fix it in post.
Yeah. Shortbox Nation, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 348, and if Cesar's fantastic introduction didn't clue you in already, we'll be spending the better part of this episode celebrating the career of one of the most revered and respected artists in American comics, Jim Lee. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show. You picked one hell of an episode to start your Shortbox journey with, and we're happy to have you with us. My name is Botter Milligan, and I'm just one of the hosts that will be entertaining you on today's episode. I'm joined by the full crew today, so that should tell you how excited we are to bring you this one. Allow me to introduce my co-host joining me today. He's not calling in today, I'll tell you that much, because he's
studio.
in studio appearance.
It's not going to be a habit.
I know.
He's my right-hand man, and after that introduction you were just treated to, he'll also be known as the Steven Spielberg of podcast intros going forward. Let's give it up for Cesar Cordero.
Annyeonghaseyo, Jim Lee. Saranghayo.
Senor Spielbergo.
Saranghayo, Jim Lee.
Non-union Mexican counterpart.
That means I love you, Jim Lee. Hire me because these busters are freaking killing me over here.
The real talent of this show, though.
Oh, wait, all of you were like that. The most old response. Ed, I expect it from you. Botter?
I had nothing to say.
He was
nothing.
like,
Wait,
you're wearing nothing. Ashley, oh my God, I see it.
what?
Sitting where you're sitting right now,
come
Ashley,
on, please.
not only do I see spider gooch, but I also see Potter's socks are on full display.
Come on now.
He doesn't even care because listeners.
Look, I've been recording you motherfuckers so long, I don't care.
I never see it. I'm always like on a different angle, and now all I see are these freaking.
It's better
weird,
than the Crocs, you know.
Right.
It is.
Just
I
bizarre.
don't wear Crocs. Really.
Look, I know this is a weird tangent, but for those who are listening,
Oh my God.
this is the weirdest experience.
I wish you would have called in.
Mute.
I wish it.
I'm not kidding. It's so strange. Like you're wearing like just the most high wateriest of pants, and
I'm
these
bending
socks
my
are-
knees.
I'm assuming they're Black Panther.
Yes, they're Black
socks?
Panther stance socks.
Okay.
Can I just please introduce Ashley?
No,
For the love of
but
God.
Ashley, I am your advocate today. All right.
Welcome to my world.
Thank you.
Do you
This is a
remember
wonderful- Go ahead.
Yeah.
Here we go.
the day
Here
with
we
the Cyclops socks? I couldn't get
Had
over
them on
it. That's
yesterday.
why.
Now
I was
understand.
staring at them for 2 hours.
Butter, you see what I'm saying? This is
At
I'm
least-
helping you. I'm
look,
helping you. This is a segue to Ashley. This is a segue.
We're gonna put a little curtain here by the.
Oh my God,
by the
please.
table.
So, look, at least I'm wearing socks now. I will apologize, Ashley, all the years I wasn't wearing
Ren and
socks.
Stimpy
He had those
close-up.
raptor feet just hanging out.
Hey,
Talons.
jeez Louise. This is what happens when I feed you guys soju before we start
This
recording.
is true.
All right, but look, the real talent and the biggest hater on this show has decided to call in and grace us poor podcast peasants with her presence. We've got Miss Ashley Lannyhoy on the line.
Hey, yeah, I shouldn't be
Exactly.
driving right now. So calling in.
Did you say you're driving right now?
Shouldn't be driving right now.
That's
That's
awesome.
why I'm calling in.
That's awesome.
Fair enough.
Oh no.
All right, and last but not least, here for me in the studio is Edmund Danzart holding down the fourth mic like the veteran podcaster he is. What's up, Ed?
What's up?
Yo, looking good. You're looking good, Ed. You're looking good.
thanks.
You got the mullet growing out in the back.
Cutting the mullet hawk. That's what I'm aiming for.
Not
Do
sure
it.
why, but I'm here for it.
It's awesome. That's why.
Dare
Really?
you. This guy lives in a glass house
Yeah,
made
look.
of Black Panther socks.
I know, right?
Are you kidding me right now?
All right. Well, look, listeners, since we are recording this episode via video as well, I'm not in the frame for the record. You really just get to enjoy the
That's why
lovely
we keep.
faces
That's why we're talking
of
about it,
Ashley,
man.
Cesar, and Ed.
We're showing you love, Spider Dude.
We will have a video version of this podcast available. Our Patreon subscribers will get first dibs before we make this available for everyone on our YouTube channel. So go smash that like button.
Smash that like button,
If you
hit
aren't-
subscribe, and if you want the nickname for Botter to be
Five-star review.
Spider Gooch, come on in
Yes.
right to the right to the show.
You know, after such a nice,
Yes.
well-produced intro, this is the intro.
I'm gonna
thing.
make
Yeah.
sure I totally like. See, you really shouldn't come back. I'm like, yes.
But seriously, if you aren't following us on YouTube, we're gonna fix that, all right? Now, Shortbox Nation, before we get to the main event, I have to ask all of you an honest question.
Oh shit.
When's the last time you visited the Shortbox store and bought
Oh.
some merch? I mean, if you're not wearing our faces on a shirt, the even Shortbox, bro. I mean, look, we've been putting out
What
this.
the hell is happening right now?
Look, we've been putting out this podcast for free for the last 9 years.
Ooh.
And
I
I
like
mean,
where you're going. I like where you're
I mean,
going.
look, we've been suckers those first 9 years, but no more.
You know what?
Cashing
Fool me 1 year, shame on you. Fool me 9 years, also shame on you because I'm deliberately blind to marketing a podcast.
Yeah. But we will not continue this podcast until you've checked out the new merch available on our store. We've
Lot of
got
good
new
shit.
hats, shirts, and enamel pens fresh from the printers available right now. Look, I'm not asking you to buy everything in the store. All I'm asking is that you spend all of your money on merch so we can feel good about putting out free
I am
episodes.
asking you to spend everything.
Limited
buy
edition
everything on the
Spider
show.
Gooch t-shirts on the way.
Oh my God, Ed, please.
Did you draw that?
Please.
Oh, man.
Spider Gooch. Just a straight pucker.
I almost feel like it's more appropriate to have a picture of this Spider-Man statue you guys are making fun of rather
It'd be
than
like
Jim Lee
Mike
at this
Allred,
point.
Madman.
It's
a big
so
old,
it's so good. Yeah.
big
yeah.
old bulge and Gooch.
Jim Lee, if you're listening, I just want you
Jim
to
Lee,
know.
We honor you, Jim.
No, we love you.
Jim,
This
we are going to put respect on your name.
For sure,
We
for
are
sure.
for sure. Just hang on.
Yeah. But for real, help us keep the lights on here at the Shorebox Studio. Consider supporting the show by buying some merch from us. We just restocked our online store for new stuff.
True story.
And you can even save 10% on your order by using the discount code YO.
Look,
That's with 2
everybody's
O's.
wanking off to nostalgia these days. We're no different, okay?
right.
We are in that business. So if you remember the 90s
Yes.
at all, which is kind of also the reason why we're doing this episode. But if you remember, if you remember the 80s, then just buy our shit. What is your problem? Vada, what are these people's problem?
Dude,
They say they rep. They say this.
I've been
It's
trying
so
to figure
easy
it
to
out.
do now.
It is easy. You
don't
just
have to
go
go anywhere.
online and you give me your freaking social security number.
Well, just money will suffice.
Oh,
but
you
yeah,
give 'em-
money. Yeah.
I guess that's a start.
Money will.
We didn't talk
money
about
should
this.
be fine. Okay,
We'll talk
look,
about after.
Mother's maiden name, social.
Thank you.
Look.
Favorite pet, household name.
Yeah, that'll work.
Street you grew up on,
Thank
whatever
you.
security.
Thank you.
question.
things I can actually use in real world, you know. But look, Shorebox Nation, there's a link to the store in the show notes. Promise me you'll do that, and we'll get back to doing what we do best. We're gonna get on with the main event.
Smash that like button.
Today we'll be discussing the incredible career of Jim Lee. He's not only a world-renowned comic book artist, but he's held the title of writer, editor, and publisher, and has found massive success in pretty much everything he's done. So much so that DC Comics basically gave this guy the keys to the kingdom. Jim Lee currently holds the titles of Chief Creative Officer and Publisher of the company, titles that'll mean a lot more when we actually look at how Jim Lee got there. For you diehard listeners keeping count, this episode will mark the 16th installment of our long-running Artist Spotlight series, the series that we first started back in 2017 with an episode dedicated to the king himself, Jack Kirby, in episode 178. Jim Lee recently won our last Artist Spotlight poll, receiving a majority of the votes from our Patreon subscribers. That's right, our patrons don't just enjoy bonus episodes, first dibs, and extra content from us, but occasionally we trust them to play producers and help us pick the topics for episodes like these. It was my turn to pick the candidates, and I thought I was going to make it a hard choice for our patrons, but Jim Lee ended up getting 75% of the
Damn.
votes.
What were the other options?
He beat out other artist nominees and comic legends in their own right,
Yeah.
like John Buscema
Sure.
and Jim Steranko.
Okay.
So Jim Lee ended up getting 75% of votes, and that's why we're here today. And it leads me to my first question. Ed, I'll go to you for this one. What comes to mind when you think of Jim Lee? What are some
Jim
words that
Lee.
immediately come to
Jim
mind?
Lee.
Jim Lee. I'm thinking, man, what a great businessman he is, as far as behind the scenes maneuvering and on top of his great artwork. This guy, it seemed like he was just meticulously planned this career from jump, starting with once he was a made man after selling 8 million copies. 8 million,
Easy.
untouchable. You're done. You'd never see me.
The man gets my respect just for constantly wearing a Malcolm X hat during the 90s.
And is it
thought
Malcolm
it was
X or is
pretty funny.
it X-Men?
Oh no, dude!
Or
it's-
Clerks 10
It was the
year
90s.
anniversary.
It was the 90s. Everyone had a
90s.
Malcolm X hat.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. He had the Malcolm X hat. Just a great draftsman. Like I said, he was one of my, as a kid, he was one of my favorites easily. But just the fact that he's navigated these waters and become like the man, the publisher of DC, from an artist, from a self-taught artist to co-publisher of DC, that's wild.
Would you say it's Wild Storm?
Very nice. We're
Damn.
here to pay an
These are
homage.
Our resident
Horrible
old dudes.
puns.
It's a
You deserve better.
Now
Jim.
look-
leave us on a cliffhanger though.
You deserve us better, Jim.
Our resident old dudes are here to shine today, y'all. Ashley, I'm gonna go to you. Do you remember what was your first conscious exposure to Jim Lee?
So I remember that that X-Men #1 at the grocery store. I do
Mm.
remember that
Oh, yeah.
because his work is so like dynamic. And I remember seeing the last name because when you're in, middle school, you can't just jump on the internet and find out anything about anybody
I mean,
because you
you
don't even have a
brokies couldn't.
computer.
You brokies definitely couldn't.
Dude, you could. The internet was just Prodigy. That's all
That's
it was
right.
back in the day.
It was Prodigy.
It was Prodigy and Errol's.
Yeah, it was nothing. So it was hard to find out more. But I do remember looking through like old back issues and seeing the Punisher War Journal and seeing the name Lee and connecting it, which back then I didn't do that too often. So yeah, he was one of the first illustrators that I paid attention to.
Okay, that's good stuff. Same question to you, man. What was your first conscious exposure?
Whoo! It's funny you said exposure because Jim Lee, God bless him, that man, God bless him a million times. 100 angels should kiss his beautiful face. And I apologize to anybody, but anyone listening just needs to just fucking nut up and shut up because it's about to get real 90s in here.
Oh boy.
Jim Lee in that very first X-Men comic, if you guys remember, at the end had like a weird sort of candid pinup where it's like all of the X-Men at a pool party.
Yeah.
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 Oh, each
I mean,
cover,
I'm saying like respectively, not creepy.
Yeah, no, you were
each
saying it
cover had
creepily.
its own pinup, separate pinup.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like,
One had a villain's pinup.
yeah, well, I mean, if you bought the Ultra Jizz 9000 #1 that had the fold out, you were gonna get like all of them in one. So I remember just seeing all of that. Like, first off, I was like, damn, this is a cool, interesting comic. And, all the character designs were different and it was just so unique. And my buddy, I didn't have it, he had it. And he would always bring it to school with him in middle school, just like Ashley was saying. And
Villain's color.
and he would just be,
Yes.
he would draw like different like pages in his sketchbook. And I'm like, wow, this is what X-Men is? Cool. And then he turned the page and there was freaking Psylocke just completely not wearing clothes, just a skimpier outfit than her regular outfit. And I was kind of like, what? Like, Jim Lee, are you creating a sexual awakening in me? What's happening, buddy? Jim
Those
Lee.
90s comics, man.
Jim Lee, what is happening with this Goblin Queen you've drawn? I don't know what's happening in my
so
underwear
between
right
Sylvester's Goblin Queen, his Psylocke, and White Queen?
Dude,
Oh my goodness.
I'm sitting here like, this is too much. I'm
Does
my
the comic code know about this?
dude, my body's getting hot. It's like my body wasn't ready for Jim Lee. Like I was like nowhere near like. Look, to say I wasn't early, like I didn't develop until later on. Okay, guys, I'll just say the only thing I had was a mustache, and that was in high school senior year, and that's about it. I still talk like a boy. This man was creating things in me that I didn't know existed. Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now. Let's keep it real. Butter, how sexually attracted to you, Jim Lee, are you?
Wow.
The man.
Got it.
His work. The man.
I mean, he's a good looking
man.
Good looking guy. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know how old he. I mean, he looks like he's still
50 something.
looking good for 50.
Yeah.
Black don't crack.
Those Asian genes, bro.
Wait, what? Here's what I gotta say about my first thinking about like Jim Lee and what he means, especially like first conscious exposure.
Oh, wait, sorry. Long story short, Gambit was totally a 90s character, product of its time.
Oh, God.
And
Gambit.
he fucking sold me on that shit. Just if you read that first issue, it's the funniest shit. He comes out of the hallway. His hair is like in a ponytail. He's not even in uniform. All the X-Men are like, let's go save the day. Magneto's being a shit. And Gambit's, he doesn't even have his shirt on. He's got a fucking not a cigar, a cigarette hanging out his mouth. And he's like, what's happening, guys? I just got done
Oh,
fucking.
mon chéri.
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
He's
fromage.
like, yeah, I smell like French onion soup. What's going on, guys? And you're like, oh,
what's up, Rogue?
who's this grody dude? But like, as a
Oh, he's
12-year-old
such a
boy, I couldn't get
sleazebag.
enough of it.
Yeah.
Yo, Jim Lee co-created Gambit and Omega Red.
Yes,
like,
dude.
Two of the most, I don't know,
Fucking
pretty badass dudes.
Fucking the most grodiest dudes. I love it.
Yeah, Omega Red was crazy.
Yeah. For me, I gotta say, when it comes to Jim Lee, for me, it was about finally getting validation from one of the friends I had in middle school who also read comics. And really, it was like the only other kid that I knew in middle school that read comic books. But
You're
he
like,
would,
hey, Tony, what's up? Shut the fuck up, Potter. Good to see you too, bud.
well, to be honest, he would act like he would like behind, like if it was just me and him, he'd be like, "Yo, so what do you think about Silver Surfer?" But in front of friends, he was like, "Get out of here, nerd!"
Get him.
Yeah.
Get him, guys. Lunch.
Yeah.
Damn.
But he would always clown me for all of these like old comics I would bring from my dad's
your dad-
stash because I was bringing like 70s Marvel,
You're bringing
John
gold to these
Buscema,
people.
right?
Gold.
I remember bringing a Fantastic Four comic that I don't think it was the first appearance of Silver Surfer, but it had Silver Surfer on the cover. I let him borrow it, and he got it taken away, and that
Your
was the most
dad?
fucking awkward conversation
what
I had.
beating did you get when you got home?
But it was pretty. My dad went back up there, ready to fight that band instructor. Like, I'm gonna need my comic book back.
But
I
your
remember-
ass with some Kirby crackles coming out my face. Bah! Bah!
But I remember this particular friend. He quickly shut up when I started bringing my dad's Jim Lee stuff, and I mean this is early 2000, probably 2001,
Bringing him the
2002.
contraband.
So I'm bringing like the early Jim Lee stuff. My dad was collecting.
So your dad was actively collecting.
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
he was collecting. He definitely
awesome.
had like his X-Men stuff. Even had like his Image stuff, including Wildcats and even Deathblow. So when I would bring those comics in, he would shut up. This friend of mine would just shut up, and he'd be like, "This is the comics I'm talking about, man. Like, look at all the action and how badass it is."
Your buddy
up to
sounds like a
date.
real chode.
Well, he reminds me a lot of the co-host I podcast with now.
Oh, how cute!
Uh-oh.
How cute!
But look. But now I'm gonna shoot you some bail, and you know what? I set that up.
No.
Poorly. But what? Honestly,
Wait,
but the next thing I was gonna say,
say.
next thing I was gonna say was that on top of that, being one of my earliest memories, Jim Lee's illustrations I think is also responsible for some of my favorite memories related to early years of meeting like Cesar, and then at that time our friend Sebastian, because I don't know, just hanging around you guys early on, your love of Jim Lee was like unprecedented. I thought I loved Jim Lee, but meeting you and Sebastian around that time and like you guys analyzing like every panel and detail in Batman Hush or
That was the
you know
because around it was 2003. So around that time,
The
like
comeback.
yeah,
Well
like,
said.
Jim Lee was doing like Hush, and we were just like, oh my god, like because we were young again, we were in middle school again,
Yeah.
you know, like it was like damn.
That and like that specifically, that was like a level up. That was like,
I think it's-
motherfuckers. I've only been gone for a couple of years.
I think it's his best work.
I think so
no,
too.
absolutely.
I think so too.
Hell, I'll go ahead and add one more thing. Jim Lee's the reason I'm friends with like Dustin Harewood, who we've had on the show a few times.
Wow.
But I
didn't
remember
know that.
bringing a stack of X-Men comic books done by Jim Lee with me when I was still working at the museum. One day, Harewood was, and he's an art teacher for anyone that's not
Weren't you
familiar.
a bouncer there or something?
I wish. I was a.
No, seriously.
I was a paid
Security, right?
Yeah, I was security, but I was more of a paid witness. That's what I was. I was a paid witness at the museum. But yeah, I was working security at the museum. I brought a stack of X-Men comics. I had put them down in a corner to go do like my rounds, quote unquote. And Harewood had brought.
What a horrible security guard. You're like the dude.
I was.
It's like you're like.
I was
Yeah, I
terrible.
gotta do these rounds. Yeah. They got me put these X-Men comics away.
But he had his art class at the museum, and he was giving them a tour. And I went to go do my rounds, came back, and and at the time I didn't know him, but here's this strange man with long dreads down to his calves, flipping through my comic books, and he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm so sorry. It's just I see you got some Jim Lee here, and he is the goat to me." And ever since then, we've been friends. That that sparked a friendship that's
the
lasted to
common
this day.
denominator here is old men. You seem to know a lot of old men.
Yeah, my collection of old men is through the roof. Top
Dude,
five.
But more than your Jim Lee collection, I think your collection of old men is pristine. No arguments.
But Ed, I wanted to go to you to kind of kick us off. And when we look at his, career, because that's one thing that me and C were talking about earlier this week is that this man has such an expansive career. I mean, we're talking from the mid to late '80s, even to like this day, he's still doing stuff. So
Are we doing origin story here? Because I
Well-
can do origin story.
Well, I wanted to know about like some of his early beginnings and
Okay.
like big break into comic books, and then we'll split it up.
Okay, because we know we're gonna talk about some Samurai Santa.
Oh
You
shit.
guys, anybody? So this is everybody credits that Alpha Flight run as his first run, but Samurai Santa by Solson Publications was his first published work.
And what is
1986.
Samurai Santa?
It's basically like an Asian guy gets hired to be a mall Santa. Of course, he knows kung fu.
Makes
And,
sense.
Awesome.
and he fights like an evil Santa that ends up being. This is before Bad Santa, but it's an Asian mall Santa that fights an evil Santa that ends up being the store manager. So you save yourself $50 on eBay to get this book. So, but
Yeah,
this
but
is,
I have never heard that mentioned. Like
Yeah.
even in this in-depth interview, I've heard of him.
he's not going to mention. So
That is funny
You
as
think
hell.
he's going to start off with Samurai
He's
Santa?
going to lead with Samurai
He's gonna
Santa when
lead
he's
with Marvel.
representing the face
Lead
of
with
DC.
Archie Goodwin. Pluck me out of the crowd. Held me up.
Goodwin held me
like Lion King.
like fucking Rafiki.
Damn. Yo,
So,
Cred Ed is in full effect today.
so like I said, the artist was Don Sacrisi, I think. So he's kind of like the guy that, and it's crazy because like I've listened to some interviews and he mentions things, but he doesn't put a lot of names on them. I'm not sure why, or if it's just he just doesn't remember. But he's kind of gets credited as kind of either introducing him to some editors at Marvel, or and I've heard interviews where he said he used to hang out at a comic shop, and he knew like a guy who kind of got in the foot in the door in DC. And basically, the best advice he said he's got, because like I said, this guy was on track to be a doctor. This guy
We're
had
talking
it-
Jim Lee, right?
Jim Lee, sorry. So Jim Lee, Princeton graduate, Ivy Leaguer in psychology. He was going to go, basically, he made a deal with his folks, because like I said, and this is, his dad was a paratrooper and a medical doctor in the South Korean military.
Damn.
Imagine telling that guy, you want to draw comics?
I would like to draw comics, Father.
So he
After
said,
being full on done with like
Yeah.
your psych degree.
so basically, you know, like I said,
Yeah.
it's full. I mean, he took the test. He was ready to, you know, apply to med school, pre-med. And so basically he made a deal, kind of had a little bit of a blowout, but he made a deal with his folks saying, and he's still living with his folks at the time. He's probably
Balls. The balls
22.
of this guy.
And it was funny because he said he had this big fight, and then he's like, well, if you don't, it's like either I get to do this or I'm leaving. And he just walks out. He like basically walks out, and then he's like, I live in the suburbs. I'm like 10 miles away from
Yeah.
any. Where am I gonna go? You know. So basically, after that they kind of had a more civil talk. He basically made him a deal. It's like, look, give me 1 year. If I don't make it, I'm going to go to med school. So
My parents would have given me 1 day. Yeah, like, you got 1 day to make
so
it.
1 day,
Right.
but everything was in order. So, like I said, he basically said he drew, and this is the work ethic this guy has. Because I still think, and like a lot of the, I guess if you want to compare with like a lot of the other image guys, Jim Lee always got better, and I think his stuff now is fantastic. Like his stuff he does on YouTube, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
and he's always improving. He said he would work.
Well, Rob,
like-
Rob Liefeld got better.
Oh yeah. Besides him and Rob, and that's good. Yeah, the 1A, 1B. Sorry.
Supporter of the show, Rob Liefeld.
Yeah, friend of the show. And so he would basically draw 10 hours a day, you know, working on his craft. Basically, no internet. This is pre-real internet. You know, this is 86, so he's getting out of college. What comes out in 86? That is a monumental year for comics.
Shit, Dark Knight Returns.
You're damn right. Elvira's House of Mystery came out in 1986. So we're seeing like Dark Knight Returns. We're seeing Watchmen.
I was
of
going to say
course.
Watchmen. That was my.
We're seeing Daredevil Born Again.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
basically, he took his. Sorry, I'm going back, but I think it's such a great origin story. But his last semester, he was doing a thesis, and he's like, "I'm going to take this drawing class." And he's always drawn as a kid. He was the kid in school that drew, that had to do posters for everybody.
Sure.
And so he took some drawing classes to kind of like just chill, you know. So I'm just going to relax, take a few drawing classes while I'm working on my thesis, and that's where he kind of reignited his love of drawing and of comic books. And he started reading. He credits Frank Miller's Batman or Dark Knight Returns to kind of getting him back in and wanting to do comics for a living. So basically, he made this deal with his folks, and then like I think 4 or 5 months later, I'm not sure where the Samurai Santa falls in, but like I said, the best advice he was basically sending his stuff out, getting rejection. The best advice he said that he got was, you need to put your face out there too. You need to meet these people.
You got to meet the editors
You
at
got to
that
meet
too.
the editors. So he goes to New York Comic Con. I think Archie Goodwin kind of takes a liking to him. He goes there that weekend. Monday, he's got an interview with Marvel.
Jesus.
And he starts working.
I'll add to that.
crazy.
When he goes to that New York Comic Con to meet Archie Goodwin, I had heard him recall that story, and he said Archie Goodwin was waiting on another artist to show up with his portfolio.
Yeah.
But he was late, and Jim like saw him and was like, "Well, shit, it's no better time than now."
It's just
Yeah.
like a damn movie. Dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Archie Goodwin's like,
Hey, can we make this quick? I got a date with Forrest Ackerman. We're gonna have coffee later.
So yeah, so like I said, his Marvel career starts Alpha Flight number 51, October of 87. So he's in there. And it's funny, he has a fun story, like his folks having Asian parent, it's it's pretty can be pretty taxing and pretty rough. But they said, but they'll support you in your creativity up to a point. When it's time to be an adult, you need to knock that shit out and then start,
Ed, do you
doing
know
some
something
grown-up
about
stuff.
this?
I can relate. I wish I had this guy's talent because there's a lot of parallels. I just don't have the talent that this guy has. But so once he got his first job, his folks were like, "Oh, you can make a living? Okay, we're good. We're gold." So this is before even selling 8 million copies. His folks were on board. Once he started
cool.
getting work, dude, it just kind of rockets off from there. But he starts with Alpha Flight, so what was cool back then is you could kind of get like on the job training. Right now, I think the comic industry is tough because you have to be a polished artist to
Right.
get in the door now. But back in the day, they put you on like a low selling book, to get your chops down, So Alpha Flight wasn't, setting the world on fire. So he starts there, and Waltz Portacio is his inker. So he's
That's
basically
crazy.
Yeah. So they become buddies, and like I said, he's one of the guys that is one of the founders of Image, but kind of takes a step back.
He's on the fringe.
He's on the fringe. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened, but he kind of stepped away.
Whilst did Wetworks, right?
Yep, Wetworks, and he did The
Was
Heroes
Top-
Reborn. He did the Iron Man.
Who
which
did
is-
Top Cow? Who had the Top Cow studio?
Sylvester.
Sylvester.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
you idiot.
Got him.
So Carl Potts took a liking to him. He was an editor, and Carl Potts, he's a journeyman. He's been in the game since '77. Heavy metal. He was an editor for I think 13 years. Editor and artist for Marvel. Epic was one of his big. He's the editor of that. So like I said, he took a liking to him, and like I said, and just for another fun fact, I think Alpha Flight 53, he draws his first Wolverine. And I know that
Oh shit!
the love story begins with Jim Lee and Wolverine.
Just the two of us.
And then he starts getting some covers. So he's moving up. Then Carl Potts starts, this is now Punisher starting to kind of get some steam.
Oh boy!
So now we're going to, go into, like I said, Punisher War Journal. And like I said, and now this is Carl Potts kind of easing in because Carl Potts starts by basically doing all the layouts, and then Jim Lee's finishing everything. So
Cool.
he's still laying everything out, but then it starts. He's Carl Potts. This kid's good, so he starts letting him take over, and you can kind of see the difference once it's. And Carl Potts is solid, but he's not Jim Lee. Nobody's Jim Lee. That's like a rare.
That's crazy that he could see that just early on.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's to be honest, that's what those guys' jobs were. They're talent scouts too. You can't just be, and that's even Archie Goodwin. He wasn't quite there yet, but there was like a diamond in the rough. You know what I'm saying? So he's, you got to see the talent, and then basically you go through the system, and then you become, one of the biggest artists of all time. So
well, I think it also speaks to just like Carl Potts' character, right? Like,
Yeah.
imagine seeing a young start come through,
Yeah.
and not feeling, I
Yeah.
wouldn't blame him if he felt endangered. Like, well, shit, comic books is
gonna
already
take my job. Yeah.
Exactly.
Not yet. Jim Lee's not taking anyone's job as of yet. We'll get later on down the road, kids.
Got it.
But Punisher War Journal. He starts, like I said, you can start seeing the you can start seeing kind of a small manga influence. Like you can see kind of like an Otomo influence in the early stuff, like some action lines, motion lines, which a lot of the American stuff wasn't really doing at that point. And then at number 5, we go to his first meeting with Scott Williams, and that collaboration has been, for like 30 years. So Scott Williams, he's like the perfect fit, because if you see some of Jim Lee's stuff that's not inked by Williams, you can, and I kind of like it better because that's just my aesthetic, but it's a lot more sketchy, a lot more loose. And then Scott Williams really tightens up a lot of that stuff, but still keeping some of that energy, but tightening up stuff where you need to tighten stuff up.
I think Scott Williams is the difference between Jim Lee's stuff popping off of the screen or
Yeah.
off of the page. I'm sorry, versus it
100%.
feeling like pencils kind of
Yeah.
flat. I think Scott Williams adds like a sense of dimension.
Yeah,
to a
it
lot
gives
of his
you
drawings.
depth, so it's
Yeah.
not just a lot, because there's so much line work, fine line work with Jim Lee stuff, with the hatching and everything. You need to have an inker that can kind of distinguish, okay, what's in front, what's in the back, give you that extra dimension, that third dimension. So after that, like I said, then he goes to what they called the X-Men office, and that was, X-Men, that was the X-Men was the thing. X-Men was the popular book. The Avengers were old timers, and all those guys. But Spider-Man and X-Men, that's where you wanted to be.
Marvel was kind of reinventing itself.
Yeah.
Like guys older than us. So listeners, for those of you who are kind of like, well, I don't understand. How could the Avengers not have sold? They're doing so well now.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Captain America was old-fashioned.
right. The idea that, the MCU, everyone is familiar with. The Disney movies are big. They're mainstream. More people are cool with the Avengers now than they are with X-Men now. Like, you ask kids now, they're going to be like, yo, my guy is Thor, my dude is Captain America, or whatever. You
can thank Fox for some of that too.
Right. Well, I mean, but the idea being that Marvel had a huge age, more or less like the Silver Age, where guys that are like maybe 10 years older, maybe 15, 20 years older than we are, were like, yo, my Wolverine was Hawkeye, or my freaking like hero was Captain America, and his comics tackled like social issues and whatever, and blah, blah. But we're all like not from that generation. So we can't, and it would take how many years to go back and find all those comics from the 60s. It just seemed like perfect timing that Jim Lee happened to be there just as Marvel is reinventing itself for another generation, right? Like, and it's not like it's an accident. The guy's talented. Like, it happened, right? So guys like us, when we're growing up, we see these comics and we see as soon as they come up. Like, I don't know, Ashley, what do you think? Like, you said that you were I don't think it's too far of a stretch that you weren't like getting crazy geeked out over every superhero comic that came out when you were younger. I mean, is that too far of a reach to say that? Or?
No, I literally I had my poll was essentially Marvel sending me Uncanny X-Men once a month.
Bingo.
Until
So,
I
like,
got to college, yeah.
Yeah, so anybody that was into comics was already kind of an outsider. Well, who are the ultimate outsiders for the freaking Marvel universe, right?
X-Men.
The X-Men, of course. So it was just interesting that Jim Lee at this point in time just happens to freaking get the golden the geese of comics without anybody really seeing it happen in the future. Like, it was kind of like, it's fucking X-Men.
And he influenced their look for how long?
And oh my
Shit,
gosh.
I mean,
fashion
to
designer
this
Jim
day,
Lee.
but especially, at that time, I mean, the whole reason we got the animated series was based off of Jim Lee's, success on X-Men.
And he's taking the place because he starts on Uncanny 248, 1989, and he's taking, he fills in for Mark Silvestri, which top talent.
Oh, come on.
Super.
Mars already said
I think
hi.
super underrated, just not as prolific as Jim Lee. He became more of the business guy than continuing the art, which is fine, which I don't blame him at all. But then, like I said, 250.
Were you into Punisher when Jim Lee was doing it, dude?
I never, honestly, the first time I really had a cognizance of Jim Lee was probably Uncanny X-Men.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
I had to go back. To War Journal. And you could see like the makings of,
because I don't see Punisher War Journal making it through my dad's censors, making it through. I got some Punisher, but it was more of like the older, more tame Punisher. Where he's using rubber bullets. And
Sure, of
not
course.
killing
Come on.
anybody. Yeah, he's got the sweet white galoshes on.
Actually, I think the only exposure to Punisher that Jim Lee did was the reference in Mallrats, where Brody
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
I need my Punisher War Journal, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, it was like, what? Why is that one so important? I don't understand. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, Jim Lee, what?
Yeah.
Like, what a nerd. I was so like complete, like, well, yeah, he had to start somewhere. He didn't
Wasn't the I don't know if it was Konami, but the Punisher game, the Punisher Nick Fury game, wasn't
Yes.
that based off of War
the
Journal?
cover?
Right?
War Journal? Well, it's I don't know because he fights Kingpin at the end of that game. I got that on emulation.
Okay. Wow.
That's awesome. It's
Nice.
fun. It's
Just
fun.
random thought.
It's then like say he does 256 through 258, and then 267 he basically replaces Silvestri leaves, and he's basically the X-Men artist now.
And I think it's safe to say my dad might have every single issue of X-Men from that point forward. My dad has always been like I think he's always, much like all of us maybe in this room, had aspirations to draw comic books. So anytime he would draw, like I could tell, like, Jim Lee was his man. Like fine details.
You would see your dad burn the midnight oil, bend over a drawing table and be like,
But it's-
Daddy, I love you. He's like, get the fuck out of my room, son.
But it's funny
I
because
hate you, son.
His
You're the reason
style-
I'm not working at Marvel.
I regret it.
Please don't.
Daddy, but I love you. Shut up. Next time, the Potter's like, I will be like Marvel. Maybe my father will love me.
Damn, you really figured me out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
What
Oh,
were we saying,
man.
Ed? Back to
This
you,
is
Ed. Sorry.
Yeah, Ed, come on. Come back to you, Ed.
We'll be back in a minute.
But you're saying Jim Lee now has taken over as the main artist on
Uncanny,
X-Men
yep.
after or Uncanny. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So this, and then like I'm not sure the time frame, but then he's so popular, his style almost becomes the new Marvel house style. You know,
That's
And,
saying
Damn.
something, dude.
Sure.
You know what? His stuff now
Between
though
him
is
and that-
definitely the house style for DC at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that.
Yeah, he's publishing. You better draw. He's good for me, motherfuckers. Firing your ass.
That's a good point.
So, and then, like I said, he gets the Untitled or the adjectiveless X-Men, they call it, just X-Men with
Chris Claremont.
Chris Claremont,
X-Men.
who basically this is when you can kind of see Jim Lee's,
Butter in
maneuvering.
post, start queuing up the freaking dingy 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 to start playing the theme song in the background.
But this is where you can kind of see Jim Lee is I'm the captain now. To Chris Claremont. Yeah, it's like you
I
don't
am
like
the
Wolverine.
Started getting a
No.
big head.
It's like you don't like Wolverine. I like fucking Wolverine. They're buying this book because of
Yeah,
me.
and I
motherfucker.
like fucking Wolverine.
I like Wolverine. And then, like I said, it's
The
so they,
importance of comics.
the first one. It's like they're co-writing, but you can see basically, and who knows behind the scenes what happens, but the editors have to say, like Bob Harris, who's
Bob Harris.
who's been a champion of Lee for even going forward in time to Heroes Reborn. They actually got him his job because they asked them, who do you want to work with?
I remember the
Bob
cartoon
Harris.
drawings of Tom DeFalco and Bob Harris in the bulletins.
So basically, they were starting to butt heads because you have two creative people, and one wants to go one direction, one wants to be more action, more Wolverine focused, more
Look, the man threw away his psychology degree for
Yeah.
this, and
Yeah.
Chris Claremont had how much, like 15 years at that point, drawing or writing for X.
You had your time.
I mean, they
My
both
time
had
is now.
They both had stuff to,
It's
invest.
So,
They both had invested in the book.
And for the record, I think we might have briefly mentioned this in the beginning, but I want to emphasize again, when they relaunch X-Men and it becomes the adjectiveless X-Men, that issue
X-Men.
1 sells, what was it, over 8
million,
yeah.
8.4 million, 8 point. I don't know. They're out there.
And I believe
Look.
at the time of this recording, it is still
It's
the
still-
what is it? It is the highest. I'm sorry, it is the all-time sale. I'm sorry, they hold a record for most single issue sales. Most single issue sales. Like
Yeah.
I think it's set a record.
Also, at the time, I believe Stan Lee is in heaven telling God, like, "Hey, 8 million copies. Can't be wrong
So,
there."
That
True believer.
basically eclipses everything. Todd did 3 million or so.
Don't say that so loud.
Oh, so Todd.
Yeah, we still trying to get Todd on the show.
He can hear you.
3 million.
But to
Still
your point, I
pretty
mean, it does feel. I think around this time, it's like every month records were just being
Yeah.
broken from
Oh.
Todd
Slam
McFarlane's
dunk.
Spider-Man.
good. Yeah,
Slam
and this
dunk.
was like the kind of the speculator market going in full effect because of this also had 5 covers. That
Yeah.
linked together and had, but it
The
was
marketing,
still,
the Marvel marketing machine was
Yeah.
at an all-time high.
so they
for
were
that
trying to
book.
appeal to the collectors, the the people who were thinking this is like buying stocks,
Right. Basically, all the chodes in high school.
yeah,
that I
and
knew
just
that
to
were
what
like,
they call the Marvel zombies, just trying to
gonna get
satiate
these
them.
books. Don't look at it. Don't look at
And
it.
I mean, this was and the thing was Jim Lee was among that group, and I mean the group that would end up starting Image. Your McFarlane's, your Lee Fields, your Valentinos, etc. But primarily those first two that I mentioned, that where it was, I think, also a change in attitude in comic book culture, where
Yeah.
now the artist was becoming like
Oh yeah,
recognizable.
It's become more
They were becoming
art-driven.
rock stars.
yeah,
and
ne-
like I said, and even just listening to interviews, like because we talk about relating to comics beyond just comic books, like being an outcast. Oh, I can relate to the X-Men, and he would say that he never thought like that. He basically said, I like comics because they were kind of escapist, fun. They're just fun, and it could be power fantasy because it's like cool guys, cool costumes with powers. So there's always some kind of psychology behind why you like what you like.
Look, I'm not even gonna try and ask Jim Lee about the psychology.
What if I had eye
behind-
beams? I'll
Yeah.
show that guy.
For the record, he would Hannibal Lecter that shit on me so fast.
For the record, I think he studied biological.
Yeah, he was biological
psychiatry.
psychiatry.
So he would just like
That don't mean
operate.
that don't mean nothing. They teach you all the other shit too. He just
he's
fucking learned the
He's
other.
more working for Weapon X.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Then
my god.
he's doing experiments on things.
Actually, I want to go to you and have you kind of speak to Jim Lee's eventual departure from Marvel and then joining the rest of the Image founding fathers in the studio they started at called Wildstorm. What do you know about that stuff?
So, well, I know it was at the time he left, like you guys talked about. I have written down that it's 8.2 million copies,
Okay.
best-selling single issue of an American comic of all time. Like, still holds the record. In 1990, yeah, in 1991, and then 1992 he leaves to start, Image and the. It's kind of confusing because there's like imprints within imprints. So there's like Wildstorm,
Yeah.
Top Cow. There's the Homage Comics.
Yeah, Image was never like one solid group. It was
Yeah.
a bunch of like
Conglomerate
factions,
publishers.
which like also they would steal talent from each other too. So
Yeah.
it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
wild.
I mean, what a time to be alive. Like,
There's
they're,
definitely a revolution
Oh, yeah.
in regards to like comic book, especially like creator-owned or comic book creators getting to own their stuff.
yeah, because I mean, he's making like actual millions of dollars for Marvel, and do you think that they're
Yo,
cutting him a check or anything?
yes, actually, he was one of these few
Really?
artists.
Father, please.
Sorry,
please.
I'm just saying.
Your
Well,
father loves you. Okay.
I'm just saying he was kind of unprecedented that he was actually getting some sort of kickback for every issue sold of fucking
Dang.
X-Men.
To be
That's a
fair,
gangster move.
Come
Not
on.
enough to keep him there, though.
Meanwhile,
well, to be fair,
Ooh.
there was a royalty system in place
Yeah.
at the time, so that's why.
after every other OG artist had to suffer.
Yeah, well,
on the back.
to be as much crap as Jim Shooter gets, he's one of the guys that really kind of instituted that the royalty system.
He
So,
kept it from artists just being looked at as moving parts.
yeah.
Just things cog in a ginormous machine, as opposed to what they really were, building blocks for the institute of what we know as
Because that's
transcendent
why
art form.
and that's why Rob Liefeld's still getting Deadpool royalties because it gets kind of confusing, but even if you create a character during the 90s, probably late 80s to 90s, you still get royalties.
Interesting.
consisting. So that's why Liefeld still gets. That's why you see him at all the Deadpool premieres and shit.
Milking the shit out of that
But
cow.
I mean,
that's
you
why
know.
Todd McFarlane took a year off of comics because he sold 3 million. He became a millionaire.
Look, I just did some quick math, right? I said if Lee was getting, because I think that issue of X-Men is what? What's the sticker price on that, Ed? Like $1.25 or something?
150.
150.
Okay,
I knew
150.
it. I knew it.
Let's just say that he was getting, and I'm lowballing it. Let's say he was getting 5
So your
cents.
standard Marvel play.
Yes, exactly. Following the standard protocol. If he was getting 5 cents for every issue sold of X-Men #1, and I just went with 8 million for a clean number, that is a $400,000 check.
Yeah.
And this is early 90s.
Yeah.
I think
That's how those guys financed Image through those royalties. They weren't-
Marvel.
they weren't. It wasn't the fact that they weren't getting royalties, but they weren't getting any of the merchandising money. It wasn't the fact they weren't getting money. They weren't just getting as much as they felt they were entitled to.
Imagine Stanley. They built it off what money?
Herbie's giving him the finger.
but back to you, actually, as you were saying. So they end up building, uniting, forming Image, and we've got all these different.
Bought her
imprints.
cue the music to the Wildcats cartoon show.
Got it.
Wildcats.
Yeah, so Jim Lee and Brandon Cho Brandon Choi,
Choi.
Choi,
said
they
Cho?
do Wildstorm, which is a cross between Wildcats and Stormwatch.
Yep.
And so they're owning everything that they put out, and it's just there was a lot of cool, like, looking into it, there's a lot of stuff I didn't realize came out of Wildstorm. So they did, those two, Gen 13.
Oh,
They actually published Ex Machina, that Brian K. Vaughan, Tony Harris book. And then I was reading that they were, starting a series and they were looking for talent, and he was thinking about, kind of stealing John Romita Jr. But he decided to do a talent search, and for better or for worse, that's how we got J. Scott Campbell.
yeah, that's right.
Wow.
That's crazy.
You don't fuck
Dude,
with
they
Dylan
would-
Campbell?
They would. I
I-
know they like a
maybe
lot of
it's
those
the-
guys would just recruit from, they send them like some stuff, and they would just fly them in because they were just like making money hand over fist. So yeah, it was wild.
Hold on, let's not gloss over this. Ashley,
please.
what are your thoughts on J. Scott Campbell?
I love it.
As an artist, I think he's very talented. I
Uh-oh.
think it's just working at the comic shop for so long and seeing the people that bought the J. Scott Campbell statues
Oh, okay,
All
that's
them
different. That's
cheesecake
different.
Yeah.
is where it's yes.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like the difference between Rick and Morty fans. I totally understand.
Yes, exactly.
The reason I like him a lot is just because he kind of almost combines like Jim Lee and some of that cartooniness of like Art Adams.
Oh
And I
yeah.
love that style. Yeah, I didn't. But that's kind of one of those things. It's like I don't really need to. He just does covers, and yeah, I don't need to get a slutty Cinderella.
Actually,
statue.
I think Wildstorm at one point also they were publishing Astro City, my favorite.
Yes.
My fucking favorite.
Yeah,
yeah,
they
man.
did that Homage Comics imprint, and they did all kinds of stuff under there. They did that The Strangers in Paradise, that Terry Moore book.
That's right. That's right.
Um,
Oh man.
And then also the Max for a little bit, and the Boys.
Damn, they had all the sound like they had all the best shit.
Yeah.
I
they
mean, at
had-
the time,
yeah.
they were like kind of
Well,
pioneering.
during the boys' time, that's after the DC sale. And
Okay.
DC basically said, "Oh, this is too much," and then they went to Dynamite. So,
Well, I guess actually, since you brought it up, from an artist perspective, what do you think about Jim Lee's work, especially around this time, like with his Wildcats work and the stuff he was doing for his own titles?
So I think from the very beginning, he's been improving, but it's always been so, I think like dynamic is like the one word I would use. So everything that you look at, especially every cover, it's literally just like bursting off the page, and you just kind of see this progression. And I do like, his more recent, like past 10 year stuff, but when you go back and look through it, it started off dynamic and just continually got more dynamic, if that makes sense. Like that's just the one word I would use to describe everything he's done.
That is well said. Did you have anything else to share in regards like this time frame for Jim Lee?
No, not because I think after this they sold Wildstorm, did DC bought it, and then he went back to work for the big two after that. So but I think this was like important for him to be able to like go out there, and you see like what an eye he has for talent when he's the one publishing and putting things out.
and I think this is the time too, once he's running his own company, that he realizes I don't want to run my own company.
Yeah,
It's like
because he was
I'd
serving him
rather-
with the role as editorial director.
Yeah,
of
he
the whole
says
company.
like I'd rather be instead of being the goat, like the guy that writes all the checks and is putting all his money on this, because I know, and this is coming from some interviews and some things, but I know this is after the boom, the speculator crash, so he's looking for, okay, I need to get out. So I know he first approached Marvel to sell Wildstorm. They denied it. And I think it's good because I think it was right before Marvel's bankruptcy happened. So he was shopping around for longer than even the partners knew about.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, he's like, that's what I think he's such a great, he navigated these waters and was really smart. You could see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
And I know one of the big factors, dude's got 9 kids.
I was about to mention that.
Jesus.
Like, yo,
I had no idea.
9
this
I didn't
man
either.
has 9
children.
Hold on. Before anything, Ashley, was any of the work that Wildstorm they were putting out, was it on your radar?
Actually, no, not when it was coming out.
Yeah.
Not until like later when I was working at the comic shop, and I would just have hours of time to just browse, that's when
Right.
I started getting into
And
it.
another thing with Wildstorm, they also did the cliffhanger stuff with Bocciolo, Joe Mad,
I
and J.
remember
Scott
that.
Campbell.
I've
and
got
then,
a bunch of Battle Chaser comics.
yeah, those are awesome. And then
So
Well, I wanted to ask,
I was gonna
Ashley,
say-
what titles from Wildstorm stood out to you?
So it was mostly like the later stuff, like after DC bought it. Because The Authority is probably one of my favorite comics of all time. And
how
also
would
like
you
the
how would you sell that to somebody who doesn't know anything about the Authority?
well, see, it's hard because when you go at the core of it, it's just like the deconstructed superhero that you've seen before.
Sure, sure.
But I don't know. There's just something about it. I think because I'd just read Watchmen, and then I found this not too long after, and it was just like a more modern, like better approach to it, I guess.
Who are
Don't
the
tell
creative?
Alan Moore I said that, but
No, I won't say anything. Who are the creative team behind it?
so it was. I think the very first one that I started off with, it was Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch.
Okay.
But it was just so beautifully drawn, and these characters were so complex, and there was just so much of it
and Warren
that
Ellis is like
yeah,
a lot more readable.
So these guys essentially they
yeah,
were young in their career, yes, at the time when the Authority came out, because Brian Hitch would end up being put on the Ultimates.
Yeah.
You know, that's a larger profile book, I would assume, because it's big too. So I
yeah.
mean, that's something that to Jim Lee's credit as well is that he's got a bunch of creators that are being,
Yeah.
you know,
And the big thing with America's
Attached to
Best
this.
Comics, to Alan Moore's imprint,
Oh yeah.
which I loved, which I thought was great until
why you laughing, Ashley? Why you laughing?
because that's Tom Strong, Promethea.
So glad you mentioned me about my comic.
But then
book
he
imprint.
sells them to DC, which is like a big fu to Alan Moore. So
I'm used to it. It's
Yeah,
all right.
more.
he just killed off his own universe.
I'm like the Eeyore of comic creators.
but there
so
was
it's
a lot
safe-
of talent.
Yeah. So it's safe to say that at this time, Jim Lee, we start seeing that business savvy side of him that we can definitely see on full display nowadays. Collecting the best talent. It sounds like he really let everyone kind of do their own thing. He had a very diverse selection of titles that was coming out through Wildstorm. And you know what? And Ed, you brought up something that made me think of something he said in an interview where the reason why he also didn't want to go down the medical route and become a doctor like his father was he noticed that his dad had to study to renew his license, and he was like, well, I don't want to keep taking tests. And
Never ends.
so
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of see that attitude here where it's like, well, shit, now that I own my own studio and I can do what I want, I just want to go back to drawing. He wanted to follow that passion once again, and that's what kind of leads us to his return back to Marvel with Heroes Reborn, which, if I recall, it kind of upset a lot of not only fans but other creators that felt like, dude, you just made a big stand going to Image, and now you're back with Marvel. So can you speak a little bit about that return back?
Sure. So he comes back to the House of Ideas, as it
Todd
were,
voice.
with Rob Liefeld. I didn't understand why he would go back. I mean,
Not
Jesus
happy.
Yeah.
Christ.
Not happy.
It's not.
is
It's not.
off-topic
Hey, look,
Carlin.
it's not for me. It's not for me. Baseball.
Because they offered him.
Spawn, baseball,
They
and
offered
Spawn.
Todd to do Spider-Man at that time too, and he's like, "F you guys."
He's like, not only did I did it, I did it. So, yeah. So essentially, Lee and Rob Liefeld, they come back to Marvel, right? And it's crazy because these guys, they started Image. They proved to like the big two, like, yo, we're just as competitive, we're just as hungry, and we're just as dangerous. So watch out. They made a splash, okay? And maybe not in that sort of like derogatory way. Like, I feel like Todd may have gone a little more overboard. Like, yo, fuck y'all. We ain't doing shit with you,
Oh, that's Todd.
motherfuckers,
That's his-
But like,
Yeah.
but there's something to be said about Jim Lee's hustle and the idea that this man has 9 children. No, just kidding. The idea that
9 children.
9 children.
Keep it in your pants.
Look, they ain't dying of boredom at the Lee house, okay? The
you
man,
need to do some little snip.
the man is an artist, and the man is an artist. You know what I'm saying? Look. That said, look, this is a guy who I'm going to say it. You could put him up there from a financial and creative way, not so much creative way, more like what he brings to the table with Kirby, because they both like reinvented everything, right? So
only thing I would disclaimer is like I don't think he created like Kirby.
not
But
at
I see
all.
what you're
That's
saying.
not what I'm saying.
But I
That's
see
what I'm
you're
saying. Not
Yeah.
from a creative perspective, but like what they bring to the table
Sure.
as far
Well
as
said.
talent is concerned. That's what I'm
Sure.
talking about.
Yeah.
So like, he's there, and you know, it's almost like history sort of repeating itself. You have another bad boy artist, arguably the bad boy of comics at the time, right? And it's strange, man. He opened the door for a bunch of people. And he comes back to Heroes Reborn, right? For those of you who don't know, Heroes Reborn, it was like Marvel wanted to kind of do what they did with the Ultimate Universe, just maybe 10 years earlier.
A fresh coat of paint.
Yeah.
On some stagnant titles.
But the thing is, look, I don't know if you guys remember. Ashley, Ed, we're a little older than Botter, so I'm gonna have to lean on y'all. Wizard Magazine put out promos for the Heroes Reborn stuff. Do you guys remember any of that stuff? Like any of the, because we had no idea about the story. We just had Jim Lee's drawings. Do you guys remember any of that stuff?
I remember the biggest thing I remember is that double bicep or double barrel chested Captain America.
Well, that's Liefeld.
Liefeld. Yeah, that's the only thing I remember about Heroes Reborn. I remember the announcement of they were coming back, and that was like, and I was listening to Rob's podcast because he did a 4-part series about Heroes Reborn, and he said it was like, yeah, it was he was getting it from co-founder Todd McFarlane giving you shit, and you have a bunch of editors not wanting you there.
Right.
And like even when we talked about that Eternals episode, there were people bitching about Kirby coming back for Eternals.
Of course.
So you could imagine like the people who were on these titles, these respective titles, and then like Liefeld's complaints, they were doing Capwolf. Come on, what do you? They were doing Capwolf before I took over Captain America. But,
so I guess what I'm trying to say is that we, from a reader's perspective, we didn't know what was going to come about. All we knew, at least me personally, I should say, I remember looking at and I'd see his version of The Thing and Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
And even Sue Richards.
dude, his Namor is.
Oh my gosh. I was like, wow.
Ashley, check out this Namor.
All this stuff looks so good. And at the time you're thinking like this is gonna be an explosion. This is gonna be so good. Jim Lee, this guy just revolutionized the X-Men. He's gonna revolutionize. I didn't give a fuck about the Fantastic Four, but now I do. And we didn't.
And
we did not care.
And you got
when it
to
came
understand at this time too. Like I said, these guys got big money. Why come back? How about $3 million to do Fantastic Four?
Right.
Wow.
Right.
They both got Liefeld and Lee each got $3 million to do this, and I think they were expecting those old numbers, those millions of
Well, they wanted. It's strange because I feel like they didn't. This is complete editorial. I don't know my fucking ass from my elbow, but I feel like maybe the old heads at Marvel that were running shit were still running shit like it was the 70s without realizing, or maybe willfully in denial, the reinvention of comics, the modern age was happening at that point in time. And these guys are sitting here watching these artists, these badasses.
That's the thing too, and that was that mentality of like you were saying earlier, like it's not the artist, it's the title. It's not Jim Lee, it's X-Men. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
it's not,
exactly.
Like I said, it's like Marvel is what sells the books, not the artists, not the writers. They're all interchangeable. We just bring talented people in, cycle them in and out. That's why they don't have any like full-time people at that time, especially. The only full-time people were editorial people.
Yeah.
So, and even after that Image exodus, they didn't really do a lot of promoting of artists.
Sure.
And like no one really did it since Stan Lee did it. He would say, "Oh, the great Kirby, the wonderful Wally Wood," he would do those little blurbs. But yeah, like I said, it was like you don't sell the books, the characters sell the books. That's the mentality.
Which is at the time, at least, and I think this is around the time that all of us started buying comics not based off characters.
No, I was following artists.
That was
100%.
That's the beginning of, man, that's crazy. The modern age is the beginning of people starting to follow on mass creators as opposed to the title.
And it's
right?
funny, Jim Lee told a story too, like when he would collect comics as a kid, if it was an artist he'd like for a book, and if they changed the artist, he would stop the book.
Yeah, I mean, he was ahead of the game. The guy was freaking seminal, to say the least. And I remember, like, while this was happening, like, they wanted him to reimagine the Defenders, Doctor Strange, Nick Fury. These are all, and it's funny because, again, this is also, look at the titles they chose. Defenders, Doctor Strange, Nick Fury. These are all titles that have previously had people who were attached that changed the game, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking like, yo, why don't we let this guy run, like, just let him go crazy. No. We're gonna do the same thing we've always done. We're on autopilot. Steranko fucking did Nick Fury, and look what he did. Come on, let's just do this. It's like, I don't know. It's so
A lot
strange.
of missed opportunity and
Yeah,
like
that thing
potential.
too,
that
and
was
just
up.
just a lot of myopicness, I
And-
think.
and
Like a lot of can't see the forest for the trees
And
going down.
according to
What do
some,
you think, Botter?
I remember. Well,
I mean,
I do
look,
agree.
I'm
Heroes
not
were-
trying. Look, I'm not, and this isn't an ageist thing.
Yeah.
All right, like
Yeah,
Ed and I
I guess.
happen to remember a little more about this time just because
what were
we
you
fucking
thinking in
have,
your crib?
Yeah,
Talking about
because we have bad knees and horrible backs. That's why.
So when it came to like books of that time, right, in that age, is the only way I was able to kind of gauge how good they were was, well, does my dad have a full run? How much of this
My
stuff does
God,
he
we
have?
need to bring Jim Lee in here. You need to have
Oh,
a couple
man.
sessions on the couch.
Well, I noticed that all of his Heroes Reborn stuff ended around, I don't know, I think by third issue he didn't have anymore. And I'd ask him, Dad, it's Jim Lee. Why didn't you collect more of it?
we don't say his name in this
Well,
house
his thing was
anymore.
like, well, because the story sucked, Botter. He was like, they were banking too much on the art, selling it, and
And
they
when
forgot
your
how
buddy
the
from
story-
high school is writing the comic book for you, Brandon,
Brandon Show, yeah.
he was like the only other Korean kid in this town.
But I mean, if you're looking at those comic books strictly from an artistic perspective, especially like the titles that Jim Lee was drawing, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and then eventually all of them, I think, at some point.
And so,
it is some of his good stuff.
Yeah, and just to go back with this, it wasn't just this is money for, just Liefeld Lee. This is basically your studios are producing this book.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like I
Yep.
said, because it wasn't just Fantastic Four. He had Wiles Portacio doing Iron Man, which is beautiful stuff. And one of the things too that kind of why that kind of had an abrupt stop was Marvel starting to go through some bankruptcy issues. This is when Marvel's just spending money left and right, crazy, buying card companies, sticker companies, starting magazines, all this stuff. And
Thank God, because I ate that shit up like.
oh yeah, but
Too bad I couldn't save them.
but
Right.
but from what I've heard is that basically they wanted to cut their contracts, Liefeld and Lee's. They said, okay, we want you to still do this, but we can only pay you. And they're basically like, boop,
Yeah.
So and this is, I think, one of Lee's first kind of attempts to sell Wildstorm.
Well, let me get there. Let me get
Oh,
there. Let
okay,
me get
sorry,
there.
my
This is my turf here.
Okay,
all right.
my bad.
So, this is to what you're saying. He left Image. He sold Wildstorm to DC, right? And the only reason is so that way he could get back to art. Like this guy just wanted to get back to being an artist. Like
He didn't want that pressure too.
right. Like
running a company.
he's like, yo, that's why I didn't want to be a fucking
Yeah.
doctor, man. Get the shit out of here,
Yeah.
man. I want to create. I want to be an artiste.
I don't want to run a studio. I want
Right.
to be an executive.
He wants to have fun, man. The guy's fucking about fun.
Well said.
So, I mean, just saying. So he draws a Batman black and white backup story for the first issue of Gotham Knights in 2000, right? Then in 2003, an anniversary of meeting Botter for the first, a fresh face
Young,
Botter.
naive.
I think that might have been a
Young-
little too early. But
Young, no. I met you back in 1987. Young, fresh face, cherub like Botter.
Oh.
Sweet.
Hello, sir. Do you read comics too?
Sweet, naive Botter. I met him. He
Give him
didn't.
a pat on the head.
He had no. I tussled his hair.
You scamp.
I
Run
was,
along,
uh,
you scamp.
Well,
Here's some Dark Knight Returns. Come.
well, he essentially was talking with DC, and he collaborated with Jeff Loeb on a little thing we call Batman Hush, and I think it's universally agreed that. Actually, I don't know. You didn't really chime in. What do you think of Jim Lee's work during Hush? What do you think?
Oh, that's my reading recommendation. As
Yeah.
not being huge into Batman, I love that book.
Okay, so I'm gonna then make the statement that the short box wholeheartedly agrees that Jim Lee's best work is Batman Hush.
I think so.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I'm gonna
I'll go on
say
that
if you
limb.
haven't read it, I highly
It's
recommend it.
published work. I think this is his best. Yeah,
Oh
published
yeah,
work.
for sure. So it's a 12-issue run, and the freaking sales are completely successful.
This is LL Cool J. Don't call it a comeback.
Dude,
Been here for years.
That's what I'm saying.
Fucking right, Ed.
So in 2004, he does
He ain't
For
losing.
Tomorrow with Brian Azzarello. And I think that was more of a calculated move because Azzarello was popping off with,
Yep.
was it
100 bullets.
100
And I mean,
bullets.
and it was like, look, I did Batman. Let me show you I can do it with the big blue Boy Scout.
Sure. It's
I know.
all right. It's all right. It's
I
all
don't
right.
recommend it nearly
That was
as
the new
Yeah,
52,
I'm not gonna
right?
say it's bad.
That was the new 52.
No, way before.
Was before? Okay.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, way before. But in 2005,
I didn't see one page of that.
the
Come on.
sweet, the pasta gnocchi, the deliciousness of all-star Batman and
my
Robin,
God.
Boy Wonder, the goddamned Batman, delicious. He worked with one of his heroes, Frank Miller.
Absolutely.
You know,
what
and-
do you say to Frank Miller?
You
Could you
don't-
imagine reading those scripts?
Oh my God,
Yeah, you chuckle to yourself and you do the damn job.
It's like,
Yes.
it's like you want
Butter.
Vicky
What-
Vale in her underwear for 8 pages?
All
Yeah,
right.
the
Like,
answer
I
is
get to go on a date with Bruce Wayne.
if
Yeah.
you're a fucking pervert like C,
What
then
is
yes,
this?
you do.
Okay.
I was going to say, Butter, this is a cool story that we were talking about over the phone where Jim Lee, and correct me if I'm getting this anecdote right or wrong, that he would work out or he would work out to John Byrne and Frank
Yeah.
Miller. Go ahead. No, tell the story.
So,
It's a good story.
I mean, it really kind of goes back to his origin, right? So to kind of piggyback off what Ed set up, when he made that arrangement with his parents, give me 1 year, I'm going to dedicate all my time to drawing comic books. Much to what Ed already covered, he'd wake up from bed and he would treat it like an 8-hour job. Even though he didn't have the job, he would spend 8 hours drawing. I mean, to the point that he was pinching nerves in his shoulder and having bloody knuckles. But one thing that he would also do in addition to drawing is he wanted to get, I don't know, I guess he wanted to keep his physical up. So he wanted to also get stronger physically. So he'd go for, mile runs and long jogs. And what he would say underneath his breath was, Miller, burn, Miller, burn. It's like that level of dedication is unreal.
Look, you ain't an artist unless
Come
you
on,
fucking
what?
done push-ups to fucking like Frank
Chanting to yourself.
out. You're sitting here like in the Dark Knight Rises, like this shit, like you're sitting here like Neil Adams, Barry, Winsor, Smith, Frank Frazetta.
That to me speaks to
Yo, that's
To me-
fucking my new
yeah,
routine.
look-
Yo, I'm about to Bernie Wrightson the
God.
shit out of
Burn.
some
Like
burpees.
ripped.
Jim Lee is the definition of that adage of like 10,000 hours equals
Sure.
becoming a master. That dude has put in his 10,000 hours easy. Hell, his drawings to this day, I think he still says I spend 6 to 8 hours drawing on one sketch because I take it that serious and I think of everything.
Dude, no one's gonna fuck with you in the gym if you got like fucking 245s on each side and you're benching. You're like Bruce Tim.
Well, they might do the opposite.
They're gonna look at you like, what the fuck did that?
They might do the opposite and give you a little one of these. Loser.
Not if you got 240s on each side, 345s, and you're sitting here,
yeah.
you're like, Nerd Adams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we all know, but everybody knows the story as far as All-Star Batman and Robin. Okay. Do you guys want to chime in? Do you have anything to say about Frank Miller?
If you want to see Robin give Green Lantern a tracheotomy in a yellow room, this is your book.
Yeah.
If you want to see him train Robin by having him eat rats in the Batcave and kidnap a child,
You want to see Joker fuck?
Joker
Oh,
with
that's
a,
true.
a
It's
girl,
a
with,
dragon
girl with a
tattoo?
dragon tattoo,
It is
full back piece,
it is essentially you take
randomly kill somebody.
you take Frank Miller's normal edgy, very
Oh.
dark noir and turn up the
Swastika
dial.
boobs is in it.
Yeah.
If you
Oh,
want
that's
to see
right,
what
that's
happened
right.
to her.
Bruno.
Thank you.
Bruno?
Ed. That was a very important thing to.
This is an important footnote in
But I mean,
comics history.
it's essentially Frank Miller turned up to like past the last number on the dial.
I think. Well, I was thinking about that.
It's pretty zany.
I don't think it's really all that turned up in the sense that Frank Miller's his rationale for doing that sort of comic that way is that for him all the silly shit happened. So like all the silly stuff that happened with Batman where it's like, hey old chum, by golly, all this stuff, like all that stuff really did happen and really did have continuity. So what would happen if you took these characters and moved them to where maybe the stakes are higher, but they still live in that really weird 50s age where it's like, what the fuck?
It's like a dark camp.
It's not for, you're right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's dark camp. It's not for people who aren't comic book readers. Like you seriously have to be a comic book head to understand and appreciate All-Star Batman and Robin. Just for the fucking art alone.
The art's great.
But if you want to like get into all of it, like that's man, damn it, Ed, that's good. Dark camp.
I will say this.
Jim Lee's
I will say this: if All Star Batman and Robin had the script or the story was whatever well received better, I think we'd be saying All Star Batman is probably Jim Lee's best work.
If they finished it,
Like straight up,
yeah.
it feels like All Star Batman. If Hush was a 10. All-Star Batman to me, art-wise, is like just a 10.5, just a little better. Especially like some of those covers he was doing, Jim Lee was doing. I think it's still some of his best work.
Sure.
And I think the only thing that hurts it is the fact that we all look back at the story as being like way too zany. And it's such a meme thing right now, right? Like in regards to comic book culture, All-Star Batman and Robin is a meme comic book. You know, like how many times have we heard?
They were
going to
do a
Batman?
whole line of All-Star, this, that, and the other, and that killed it.
Yeah.
You know, they did All-Star Superman, which is well received.
Oh my
but,
gosh.
yeah, there was supposed to be a whole new like pocket late, All-Star this, All-Star that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, let's fast forward to the 2010s. Did you guys I'm gonna say a word, a few words, okay? The words the new 52. Oh man, already with the okay. Ashley, do you have thoughts on the new 52? We can laugh about it now. We're past it. It's fine.
Oh man, I don't know. Like I get that it's getting hate, but
I'm
I
right there with
was
you.
working, I think it was when I first started working at the comic shop, and it was a huge deal. Like sales were amazing.
Yep.
And I was reading the Wonder Woman, and what did he do? He also did the Justice League,
I was about
Yes.
to say, yep.
which was
Jim Lee-
actually pretty good.
He worked
And
with
then
Jeff Johns.
yeah, Jeff Johns, and then I remember that Superman Unchained #1 cover where he's
Scott
like
Snyder.
just breaking through. Like it was not all bad. There was some good stuff in there.
There was it was a risk. I'll say that much about New 52. It was a risk that needed to happen. Granted, it upset a lot of the old guard of DC fans because of what they did with continuity, some of the decisions they made. But I think to bring a breath of fresh air for DC from especially like a business standpoint, Ashley, to your point, I was working at the comic shop around that time, and them books were flying off the shelves.
It's true.
Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fact, it sucked that they reset fucking 52. They launched
it's too
52
much.
#1. Yeah, it is too much.
It was bloated.
Yeah.
That's my only issue. But there was some good gems. I love the Batmans, the Snyder Batman, Capullo. Like,
And our
Oh,
listeners
yeah.
might be asking like, well, what does Jim Lee have to do with it? And if
Well, I was going to say he basically was the architect with Jeff
Yeah.
Johns.
he did the redesigns too.
I mean, he and look, this is a guy. Jeff Johns was the chief creative officer. Okay, this is a title that Jim Lee would eventually
I'm
get.
the captain now.
Right? Like it's just like it's so strange. It reminded me of like SNL when you have like people who start off as writers, and then they end up head writers, and those head writers pick up another like protege that was working there. Like you got your Adam McKays who take their Tina Feys, Conan O'Brien, all this sort of thing. No stranger in comic books, right? Like it sort of happens the same way. Joe Quesada ends up running the shit, and the idea that Jim Lee is now sort of like. This is like his meteoric rise to power as far as DC is concerned. So I don't know, like Botter, can you shed some light on that sort of stuff?
Oh yeah, like this era Jim Lee to me is when I really started honing in. Just like seeing this well-received, world-renowned artist start, and it, for the most part, it sounds like it just kind of fell in, right? Like everything just kind of fell in place for him.
It was around the time I started talking
The invisible
to you
hand.
too. The
making
real
the
time I
moves.
started talking to you.
But I mean, this is like watching Jim Lee's career from around this time, 2010, to on even up to this point is pretty impressive to see everything he's just kind of accomplished and done. So to see his point, when they relaunched the New 52, Jim Lee and Dan Didio.
This guy.
I know. My bad. I got Lee written here, and anyway, automatic. Anyways, it's a reflex.
I love you, son.
But around this time, 2010, Jim Lee and Dan Didio are both holding the titles of co-publishers of DC Comics. And one thing to remember is at this point, DC Comics DC Comics is the publishing arm of the larger DC Entertainment. They launched DC Entertainment 2 years ago. DC Entertainment manages the comic book arm as well as all the IP and characters that are used in other things by its parent company, Warner Media. So, in regards to the comic books, you got Jeff Johns as the chief creative officer, and then Lee and Dan Didio running the publishing part of DC. So a lot of the design and art direction, was coming from these three guys. So much. No, sorry. We've already mentioned that Lee was responsible for, was involved in the entire New 52. He designed, the more contemporary costumes that we now see in the DC universe.
I mean,
including,
he's no stranger to doing it. So.
Exactly. And here's the thing. And that's not
that should influence like real life fashion.
That's what I'm saying is like you've got artists that do redesigns of characters that now impact and influence the title going forward before another artist decides to redesign. But Jim Lee's, I feel like his redesigns impact not just the comics for a long time to come, but also everything, but the association with the character, like X-Men. Immediately you probably go straight to the animated. Hell, his artwork impacted the cartoons, and then something else that one of my favorite things about his influences, those video games that we all love, Marvel vs. Capcom, X-Men vs. Street Fighter. I remember
even the X-Men 4-player.
Yes, all based on his artwork. Hell, I remember reading one of these Capcom art books, and they were talking to the original artists of the series, which to me they are some of the best. They are fantastic artists, especially the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 artist Bingus. But they asked Bingus, like, hey, who's some of your influence? Because your art is loved in America. And he was like, well, that's crazy because Jim Lee was the guy that we were told to mimic. Because we knew we had to sell this video game and, X-Men was a hot commodity. Well, who else should we kind of copy? We don't know how to draw the X-Men. We're looking at Jim Lee.
Drill Claw.
Yeah, right?
Let's have a mirage.
So you look at DC and his work with New 52 and those redesigns that he did not only changed their looks in the comics, but it was also like, how many times did you see like that form of Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman in other merchandise shit, and in cartoons, blah, blah, blah. So you had him doing that, kind of enjoying that role. And I think Lee even says, I enjoyed being co-publisher because I didn't have to get into the weeds of the business.
For now.
Dio? Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, so he enjoyed being co-publisher. He got to be more artistic, hands-on with like the art direction, which he loved. And then the next few years, man, it was really just about enjoying the opportunity to be like the face of DC. He got to do, he got to do a lot of press runs for TV shows like Face Off on Sci-Fi. He was like a special guest. He got to be involved with partnerships with like Kia Motors. They did like a Justice League campaign that was dedicated to fighting hunger in the
going hungry.
Horn of Africa. He got involved with video games. He helped them design. He helped design the new version of Scorpion that showed up in the first Injustice, game. So it's like he was able to take his art and apply it across so many different mediums and get involved with everything that DC was also getting involved with.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Big
My
time.
name is Lee. L to the E. I used to draw Beast up in the 90s.
I would have kept let you go. If you had another 16, I would have let you go.
Like 20 bars, son.
But in addition to being involved with comics, illustration, and design, he was also putting up and standing up for other creators. And in 2013, he became a member of the advisory board for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, which if you're not familiar with it, it was founded in 1986 with the goal to protect the First Amendment rights of the comics community. So, he's also given back to the community as well. And on the topic of his charity work around this time, and Good Samaritan work overall, he also toured like U.S. military bases in Kuwait with the USO as part of when DC was doing their 80th anniversary of Batman. Do you know how fucking excited I'd be if I went into drill and they were like, we've got special guest fucking Jim Lee?
It's like,
what?
Everyone's like two people are like, and like one guy.
But that's so smart because you think about
That's actually horse shit.
Think
A fuck ton of people
Nah, for
read
sure.
comics
think
in the
about
military.
the relationship between the military and comics. So
Yeah, for sure.
World
I don't
War
have
II.
to, but Potter and I can
Yeah.
tell you. Fucking,
And I mean,
Barnes
don't-
like, yo, I fucking let people die for reading comics, dude. Yo, I turned my back on my job on the
You are
flight line reading comics,
They're all
dude.
scrolls.
Yo, duties were expected of me, and I dishonored my country for comics, bro.
Yeah. Don't ask me about my long bathroom breaks.
Stupid.
But Ed, maybe to your point, I think you were about to say, I don't. Yeah, it was probably calculated, to have Jim Lee be the face and his designs to be the face of the company. But it's kind of like, what other?
Sure. he's
Who
the
else
main
would you
man.
want it to have, right?
Yeah.
Like, you look at his success. This is a guy that started as a fucking comic book artist and went well above beyond that. It's
The
like,
dude is like Michelangelo for comics. He
Yeah.
was like the name of the Catholic Church needed a brand,
Yeah.
So they got this dude to do the Sistine Chapel, and he was like, Michelangelo, this work is so good. And the Pope was like a shitty editor, and he'd be like, could you draw maybe this person with their arms a little more foreshortened? And he,
yeah.
yeah,
funny
sure, I
'cause
guess
it's
I will.
like-
Let me get this fucking paint out of my eye. No problem.
I'll say that it almost feels like around this time, this mid.
Actually, that was meant to be my best Italian accent.
I
Do
am
not be
offended.
Oh, shit.
Forget about it.
I think it's safe to say around this time, DC smartened up and decided to finally have like a house style. And I think they looked at Jim Lee and said, the guy is proven already. Let's just use him. And I think, now I'm getting to like the last 5 years, and I'll wrap up and we can talk about something else. But in 2018 is when he became the chief creative officer. That's when Jeff Johns stepped down to pursue TV and writing.
Step down.
Ed, are you saying
Oh,
that
no.
there is a
Just like the
like
Godfather.
an ominous reason, or this was all
He's
deliberate?
playing chess. Everyone else is playing checkers. That's
Yeah,
all. I'm
fair
saying.
enough. I mean, it is Jim Lee we are talking about. That's a smart ass dude. So 2018, Jeff Johns steps down. Jim Lee gets that title. 2020, Dan Didio. You know what? Maybe there's something going on. Dan Didio leaves, and now Jim Lee is the sole publisher of DC. And just for anyone curious, because I know, you hear chief creative officer, publisher, you're like, what the fuck does that mean in comic books?
You don't fucking worry about it.
Means I'm
That
rich.
means don't worry about it.
It means I can feed my 9 children.
It means
That's
I
what
got
it
9 mouths to feed, motherfucker.
And essentially what it means is that Jim Lee is responsible for leading the entire creative team at DC Comics by being involved with all the design decisions and setting the overall creative direction that best aligns with like DC's, business objective. And I get it.
Why is that on your... You have one of those visionary boards. It says, be Marvel Chief Creative Officer so my father will love me more. That's strange. It's so precise and so specific. It's
Pop quiz.
Fire C. What the fuck?
Damn it, I thought I erased that.
Yo, get that vision
Do
board out
you
of
know
here.
who the chief creative officer over at Marvel is? Just curious.
Oh, should we?
Kevin fucking Feige. So it's
Oh.
like Jim Lee holds, that same title. But anyways,
Hey, Ed, did you know that?
I have no idea.
Did you know I'm wearing Black Panther socks right now? Why don't you take a look at him?
look at my feet, Ed. Look at them.
Behold the Spider Gooch in his glory.
But the last thing I'll mention as far as Jim Lee's recent contributions, and I think this one's important to note, that not even a month after getting that title of
Serious
winning
voice.
both fucking major titles, being chief creative officer and publisher, is when the COVID pandemic really started popping off. We started experiencing the lockdowns, and I think we all remember how tough those times were for a lot of small businesses,
Right.
especially comic shops, right? Comic shops are closing left and right. They weren't
Somehow Jim Lee managed to cure COVID. So
not cure COVID, but,
No, I
but
thought
damn
you were
near,
gonna
but damn
say,
near
oh,
held
you're
up
just-
the entire comic
That's not what it says in the notes.
retail store.
let's see here.
Around this time is when Lee starts his 60 and 60 series,
Jesus, man.
where he started drawing a different sketch a day over the course. It was supposed to be for 60 days, but of course that kind of got extended. Busy ass schedule, right? But he drew a sketch a day for an extended period of time. That series actually just ended in July of last year with a Jason Todd sketch, which I think is kind of beautiful that it comes back
Nice
around,
to
right?
come back around.
That sold for over $25,000.
Jesus.
Each sketch, though, sold. I think that was the highest one, but each one sold a lot of fucking money, right? But each sketch was auctioned off, and the proceeds from each of those were used to provide support and assistance for local comic shops and people running them that were like, having a hard time during the lockdowns. Overall, he raised over $800,000 from his sketches alone. And he was doing it all, man, from like little headshots. At first, it was just headshots, and he was like, oh, people are putting some money on these. And then he started doing like actual materials that could be used for like fucking comic covers. And then he started, hey, I can also paint too. You guys want to buy some paintings too? Started doing some paint sketches. And I mean, he covers everyone in the DC universe. Some of my favorite include a Batman Red Rain sketch. Looks great. He did a Deadman sketch that was awesome. An Ace the Bat Hound that, I mean, you just want to pet it. I mean, that's just how good he draws it.
That's saying something, considering when he started his career, people saw something that they could use. Like, if you're a little kid and maybe you saw Jim Lee's early artwork, maybe you liked it for some reason and it just resonated with you and you don't know why, right? As, look at, a publishing company would look at his artwork and they would see, working cog and big machine can make equal money, right? They're not wrong, but it also kind of leads to the downfall of not being able to see what the modern age is, what it represents. And Jim Lee is the forefront, if not one of the progenitors of the modern age of comics. That's not too far of a thing to say, right?
Nope.
So you can't just, it is, and this goes across the board as far as art's concerned. As soon as you start diminishing people to cogs and little wheels in a small machine, you really end up not seeing what they can contribute. Because now look at this guy. This guy's using his powers for good. He's taking a sketch, something that could be valued as much as something Michelangelo would have done, right? Freaking, he raised $800,000 and saying, this thing I drew on paper or on a tablet now translates to somebody's livelihood being
well said.
Like they can put food on their fucking family's table now. Like, damn it, like running a comic book store is fucking hard, man. Especially during a fucking pandemic. And this guy's sitting here like, I didn't forget where I came from.
Damn, well
I didn't
said.
forget what fucking brought me.
Yeah.
You guys, these guys aren't little cogs to me. So here's what I'm going to do. Here are my fucking powers for good. Damn, Jim Lee. What a mensch.
He
man.
wears his love of comics on his sleeve.
Good
and that's why I still respect him to this day. I want to get to wrapping up this part, even though I feel like we can go another, half an hour, or even though I feel like we can go another 2 hours talking about, more of his work. But I want to get to a good stopping point and put a nice bow on this dedication. Actually, I'm going to go to you, right? If people want to learn more about Jim Lee or see his talents for themselves, what are some of your favorite essential readings when it comes to Jim Lee or recommendations that you'd share? And if you want to share any closing words or last thoughts that you have on the topic of Jim Lee, feel free to.
Yeah, I don't know. I learned so much about him. The first time I actually saw him was I was watching Face Off. And, like I've been to comic book conventions and I know what, a lot of the comic book creators look like. And then this guy shows up and he looked just so much younger than I thought he was going to be and was like,
jeans.
yeah, he's like super charming. I was like, this is Jim Lee. Like
Yeah.
it was just kind of I wasn't expecting it at all. And then to find out that he's like in charge of all this stuff and he's like the face of New 52, which I actually really did like. I think at the end of the day, Batman Hush, I think everyone kind of will agree like that is, if you haven't read it, you need to read it. And I did like his Justice League run with Jeff Johns. It wasn't like super long, but it was really good. But yeah, and I think my favorite part is, I don't know if DC's still doing this, but they would put out these variant covers, which was just like the pencils. You guys remember those? They did that for a while.
Yes.
But the like the Jim Lee ones, there was something about them, like something about just seeing like his raw pencils.
God
Like he's
bleeds.
yes, he's just like
He's mortal
incredible.
like me.
And I'll say this about his recent work is that I feel like I think he's had Scott Williams and Alex Sinclair on, working with him and making his artwork even better than ever so long that I think at this point he's probably picked up a thing or two from them. And I feel like his inking on his own artwork or his own sketches is fantastic versus, looking back in his, very beginnings where it's like, oof, there's something missing here. I think he's kind of found that currently.
Yeah, you can find it in his proteges, people like Ryan Benjamin. I don't know if you guys have seen his work. That guy's amazing. It's really good, solid.
Yeah, you look at his pencil work and you're like, oh no, this dude has been studied. Jim Lee. Well said. Ed, what about you, man?
far as what to recommend?
Yeah, recommendations and any
Um,
closing words.
Yeah, like I said, he's like I said, I was talking to C earlier about. I was looking through my collection, and it's like I don't have a ton of his work, surprisingly, but he was one of my first, I guess, comic book art heroes. That makes sense. But it's just something that happened, when I got introduced to the Image guys, and then my taste became more esoteric and weird, and I like some of the Stranger Cats drawing. But he is remarkable. Like I said, I think if you want to see him at his zenith, yeah, Hush. I think it's kind of like a unanimous get Hush. They do a new printing of that every year, so it's easy to find. You can get it. Just get the whole collection. That's some of probably his best work I've seen. But like I said, it's a great story. It's a great origin story. I learned a lot about him as well, just because I didn't know much about him outside him, running DC and just from his art. But like I said, he's an incredible story. He's like almost him and Todd are kind of like two sides of the same coin. They both became kind of leaders in their own separate companies, where Todd kind of went on his own, and then Jim Lee went the high-ranking executive route. So it's kind of seeing how those two careers kind of split, and is like, Todd would call him and Liefeld and Lim like the L boys. He's the L boy that did really good. Like I said, of all the Image guys, like I said, he has a great story.
Well said. See, I know you've said a lot this episode, but I'll ask for just a couple
said
more words,
enough.
man.
I've said enough. I mean, I almost want to hit you with enough said, dude. Almost want to hit you with that.
Well, give us just wrap or give us recommendations.
Sure.
What are your go-to Jim Lee recs?
I mean, look, we're all going to say Hush. I'm also going to say any and everything he's done X-Men. Get your fucking hands on it. Because I think,
cannot gloss
like
over that.
Kirby, growing up, a lot of people respected him, but maybe for those old cats, he was like what you were saying. Like, you kind of take these art, not that we consciously take them for granted, but at a subconscious level, because they were there for us during our formative years, right? So, like, we think, oh, okay, what else is out there, right? Like, I'm like Ed. I like a lot of weird shit, but that's because Jim Lee kind of paved the way for all that modern weird shit that's out there
That
right now.
Image stuff was a gateway to a lot of that
Big
stuff.
time, big time, big time. Just like, anyway, I'll just say I recommend X-Men. Anything X-Men that he has done, you cannot go wrong. The artwork is beautiful, and it still holds up,
Absolutely.
which is crazy. It's fucking nuts that it still holds up. Like, it doesn't look weird or dated. Like, it's just like fucking like ODB from the Wu-Tang Clan, man. They ain't no father to his style. That's it.
Yo, I had a note here that's kind of similar. Often imitated, but never duplicated.
Yeah.
I think you will find a lot of artists now that try to aim for the fine lines, the hyper details, but there's only one Jim Lee. I feel like that is the thing about Jim Lee, is that he has solidified his brand and his look. Like, you could look at, a Jim Lee piece when you see a Jim Lee piece. Jim Lee piece. But in my opinion, I'm sorry. To me, he's very inspiring, especially his story, right? It sounds like he's a magnet for success. It sounds like, these opportunities and these things kind of just fall in his lap. But it'd be foolish not to think that he hasn't put in those 10,000 hours of practice, that he isn't, constantly refining his craft, that he doesn't love what he's doing.
That's one of the things, too, he says about talking to artists. He would ask them, like, how long did you draw? You talk about the 10 hours. It's like, oh, I just drew this last night. It's like, okay, what time? When did you draw before that? It's like, oh, the last year before I met you, I drew then. It's like, he said that a lot of these guys have a lot of people have the talent, but it's that work ethic, putting those hours in. You can't.
Artists wait for inspiration. Professionals do the job every day.
Well
And
said.
that's, I hate, I'm comparing him with his Image brethren, but that's like the McFarlane thing. He's like a athlete. He took that kind of drive to make himself better.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Dude is when I think Jim Lee comic books, to me, they are blockbusters, right? Like, they feel like a movie event. Like, this is the summer blockbuster that, every channel and radio show is going to be hyping up. Like, there's a machine behind it, and for good reason. So I'll go ahead and recommend some things that kind of highlight his story, because everyone has recommended some great material as far as like his comic stuff, but his appearance on Stan Lee's Comic Greats TV series, which you can find on YouTube, which Cesar
I sampled it.
sampled
Oh,
it
you
for the
think he
intro.
looks young now?
Man,
you look like a
He's
little
next
kid.
to Stan Lee. He for real looks like a little boy.
Yeah, but there's I believe on YouTube it's like an 8-part video, but worth watching, especially just to see this Jim Lee like do what he does so effortlessly. I mean, he is constantly amazing Stan Lee in this entire video, where he's like, I can't believe you just did that.
Yeah, one thing too he mentioned. Sorry, I just remembered this. Is like he said he even took like a mime class to get to apply that to like dynamic figure, like weight.
That's
and, like,
right.
Shifting weight.
That's
and,
Interesting
awesome.
dude.
And another fun when that sprung into mind, I just listened to interview with Sergio Aragonis, and he took a mime class with Joe Dorowski.
Jesus Christ.
In Mexico when he had to lay low for a while.
You know what's funny? I'm finding out more and more people that I fuck with were mimes, i.e. David Bowie, before he did music, went like professionally trained as a mime.
Yeah.
There might be something
Huge mime dude. So now, guys, I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be a mime.
Do it.
the rest of this episode.
Everyone's going to be like, thank God.
C is going to be the talking
Yeah.
mime.
Thank fucking
The
God.
first talking mime.
But to wrap up my recommendations,
There's a wall over here.
But to wrap up my recommendations, I'll also suggest watching The Image Revolution. It's a documentary. I believe it's on Amazon Prime, maybe. But it follows the rise and fall of Image Comics publication, told from the people who started it. Jim Lee's, heavily featured on that film. And last but not least, there is a book that came out in 2017 called Icons, the DC Comics and Wildstorm art of Jim Lee.
Right.
Came out like in 2010. It collects his work on Batman, Superman, as well.
Spoilers.
Hit it.
Eric Larson was always bald.
But this book not only collects Batman and Superman, but also his work on Wildstorm, Wildcats, Divine Right, Deathblow, all that. It's in a nice hardback. Includes some interviews with Jim Lee, as well as a tour of his studio.
Beautiful.
And a whole bunch of full color illustrations.
Yo,
and
I'm Jim
pencils.
Lee. Welcome MTV Cribs to my house.
Actually, did you watch the very last bit of that Comics Greats where he gives a tour of the Wildstorm studios? And it is the most shit looking studio. It's like the most regular looking office ever.
Yo, this is my pencil. What? I only draw an F, son. Fuck HB.
Yo, that's
Fuck
funny.
2B. I draw an Fs.
All right, Short Box Nation. I'm going to turn the tables on you guys and ask for you to chime into the conversation and tell us your thoughts on Jim Lee. Does his career or artwork mean something to you? Do you have any fond memories of picking up his books or attempting to draw like him? Let us know. Write us a short email and send it to our inbox at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com.
Keyword being short, because
Yes, please.
we're allowed to gush about Jim Lee. You are not.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So we can, we the ones behind the mics, all right? But we'll read it next episode. We're going to move on to our first regular recurring segment, where you'll get to choose between violence or literature. Don't worry, we made the choice for you. It's time for Fistful of Comics.
You can either have a mouthful of tea or a fistful of comics.
Fistful of Comics is the part of the show dedicated to all you Wednesday warriors who look forward to new comic book day every week. Think of this as a show and tell highlighting only the best new comics on the shelves right now and those coming to a spinner rack near you. The segment is brought to you by Gotham City Limit, Jacksonville's premier shop for comics, toys, collectibles, and more. If you live in the area or ever find yourself passing through Jacksonville, stop by the shop on Southside Boulevard and tell them the Shortbox sent you. For the sake of time, because I feel like we've talked your ears off, Shortbox Nation, I'm just going to share
You
Ben's.
fucking love it.
Whoa.
Well, some of them even pay for it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna share Ben's top 3 new comics list and keep it moving so we can get to all the emails we got this week. Cool. So let's talk about what else. So let's talk about what you can add to your Fistful of Comics with the help of our good friend Ben Kingsbury.
Kingsbury.
He's the owner of Gotham City Limit Comic Shop, and he loves recommending comic books as much as Cesar's old ass loves Werther originals. So let's cue up the music.
Wait, what?
Dang, man.
I actually fucking hate those candies so much.
So let's cue up the music and see what he's got for us this week. His first recommendation is Devil's Reign, Moon Knight #1. It's a one-shot by Jed McKay and artist Federico Sabatini. It's
Is
part
that a
of the
Misfits reference?
well, it's part of the new Daredevil Devil's Reign crossover thing.
I
going on.
wonder.
Probably.
But according to Ben, he writes, it combines 2 of my favorite storylines going on right now, Moon Knight and Wilson Fisk's Thunderbolt, which is enough to get me on board, so consider signing up. Number 2 is from Volt Comics. It's called Fox and Hare. Number 1 is by Jonathan Sui. I believe I'm saying that right. And artist Stacy Lee. It's a story about black market coders, mega corporations, and mercenaries. The art looks stunning, and Ben predicts that early on that it's going to be a sleeper hit, and he recommends that you hop on it. Last but not least, his third recommendation comes from Image Comics. It's Rogue Sun number 1. It's going to be a new ongoing series from writer Ryan Parrott and Abel, and an artist named Abel. According to Ben, it reminds him of Radiant Black crossed with Nocturna. This is billed as a supernatural murder mystery, which sounds right up, which Ben writes, it's right up my alley and adds another layer to Image's ever-growing superhero universe. If it's anything like Radiant Black, I'll check it out. And don't forget, and Ben also wants me to remind you guys that Gotham City Limit will be offering some new exclusive retailer variants featuring new artwork done by comic extraordinaire Tyler Kirkham. He's a great guy and even better artist. We had him on the show last year on episode 330. Check that out if you haven't. But Tyler Kirkham is doing the art for both of Gotham's upcoming variant covers coming out in February. Starting February 2nd, you got Amazing Spider-Man number 88. It'll mark the first appearance of the new Goblin Queen, and that variant will be an homage to the classic cover of Amazing Spider-Man number 238, which was the first appearance of Hobgoblin. And then following up a week later, Ben's back at it again. Gotham City Limit will also offer a retailer exclusive variant of Prophet number 1. You guys remember Prophet?
Wow, Prophet.
Yeah.
Of course, come on.
They're releasing a
My
facsimile.
knees are bad. Of course I remember Prophet.
They're releasing a facsimile edition of the original Prophet number 1, probably in anticipation of the new Prophet movie in the works that was announced that'll star Jake Gyllenhaal of all people.
Wow.
Yeah.
As Prophet?
Yep.
Wow.
That makes me want to watch it even more.
But Gotham's cover of that will be an homage cover to the classic Wolverine number 1. I've seen the artwork for both of these, and I can vouch that they are worth adding to your collection if you love variant covers. I know the Prophet cover that they're putting out will be limited to like a 500 print run only thing, so don't expect those to last long. You can pre-order those variant covers and many more on the Gotham City Limit website, which we do have linked in the show notes. Or you can stay tuned to the rest of this episode and hear how you can win both of those from us when we come back and read emails.
So is a reprint of the 90s Prophet, or is this a new
I think
series?
reprint is a facsimile edition. So I think
And
exact
if anyone
copy.
hasn't checked out, Brandon Graham kind of did a Prophet series way later than the original.
I remember you was your
Beautiful.
champion. Yeah.
Beautiful
that's
series.
cool.
Yeah, definitely check. I don't know if they're going to go that out there with the story, because he kind of goes way into the future.
I was your champion during the Adam Wallet days.
Yeah, it's great.
Shout out to
It's
Adam
really
Wallet,
good. And
man.
what was
Remember
cool
that.
about that is he continued the numbering like after the original series.
That's
So
cool.
he basically just jumped it like
That's a
thousands,
fan right there.
thousands of years into the future, where there's like a whole bunch of prophets, like John Prophet clones and things. It is insane. But yeah, that's cool.
Good stuff. All right, so there's your forecast for next month. Put those titles on your pull list by next week if you don't want to miss out. Take it from our friends at Gotham City Limit, who run the best shop in town. Any of those that we just shared will probably be worth checking out. Now, we got some emails from listeners to read up next, but before we do that, we deserve a short break, all right? We want to go refill our drinks, drink some of this soju. I got some kimchi in the fridge.
I'll drink the kimchi.
But so we're going to go on a short music break. It'll be real quick, all right? But today's instrumental comes from DJ Crumbs. He's a DJ, a beat maker, an artist, and a friend of the show. He does it all.
Stick around. We're going to appropriate the fuck out of Jim Lee's fucking culture.
DJ Crumbs has got us covered today for the music. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back to business after this short break. All right. Let's make this.
What was that? What is that?
Oh, sorry. I was talking to my dog. You could hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, Botter hit the little button he hits whenever he's about to do some stupid ass beep, beep, beep. and I heard a peek, and I was like, what? Botter, what was that sound supposed to simulate? And then you're like, sorry guys.
He was scratching at the door when we were recording, so I had to let him in.
I saw that. It was funny.
All right. Yeah. Give me 1 second. This was full of coffee, so I'll be right back.
I'm going to be filled with rice.
Oh man, have you used a bidet yet?
What?
I have a bidet in there.
Seriously? Yeah. I'm about to give him some shit. Botter.
I'm gonna wash my ass.
You,
I don't even have to take a shit.
you have a bidet?